You know, we hear the term housing crisis thrown around all the time, but let's try looking at it a different way. Not as some big, scary issue, but more like a math problem. An equation, really. One where income, housing costs, and the well-being of a whole community have to add up just right. The thing is, in a lot of places right now, the math is broken. We're going to dig into why and what it really means when the numbers just don't work anymore. I want to start with just one number. 65,860. So what is that? Well, that's the estimated number of affordable homes that are missing in just one county in the U.S., Wake County, North Carolina. And let's be clear, that's not just a statistic on a page. We're talking about almost 66,000 families, our neighbors, who simply cannot find a place to live that they can actually afford. So what happens when a number like that becomes a real, everyday problem? It's not just about some people struggling to pay rent. It's bigger than that. The entire economic engine of a community, it starts to sputter and break down. So let's just look at the simple arithmetic here. Let's forget politics for a minute. This is just about the numbers. And what they show is a gap that's been getting wider and wider for over a decade. Just look at this trend over 10 years. If your paycheck was taking the stairs, slowly climbing up about 32%, your rent and home prices were taking a rocket ship, soaring up by 74, even 85%. I mean, that huge disconnect is what's fueling this whole thing. Wages just can't keep up. It's impossible. And here's what that gap looks like for real families. A staggering 81% of low-income renters are what we call cost-burdened. That means they're spending over a third of everything they make on rent. But look closer at this darker purple slice. Almost half of them are severely cost-burdened. More than 50% of their paycheck is gone, before they can even think about buying groceries or putting gas in the car. Just try to imagine living on what's left over. But that kind of financial pressure, it doesn't just stay locked inside one family's home. It has to go somewhere, right? It starts to ripple out, spilling over into every single part of the community. And this is the key question, isn't it? If your own housing is stable, why should this gap matter to you? Well, it's because a community isn't just a bunch of separate houses. It's a living, breathing ecosystem, and a crack in one part of it will eventually weaken the entire structure. First, it hits our local economy hard. When the people who stock the shelves at your grocery store, or take care of your kids at daycare, or serve you at your favorite restaurant can't afford to live anywhere near their jobs, well, businesses end up in a constant hiring crisis. That puts the brakes on economic growth for absolutely everyone. Next, it puts a huge strain on our healthcare system. The constant crushing stress of not knowing if you can make rent has very real, documented effects on both mental and physical health. What does that lead to? More expensive ER visits instead of preventative checkups, and those costs drive up healthcare prices for the entire system. And of course, it impacts our kids. It is incredibly difficult for a child to focus on their homework when their family is terrified of being evicted. So what happens? Schools have to pull resources away from teaching and put them into crisis support, which affects the learning environment for every single student in that classroom. Okay, so whenever this topic comes up, some very fair questions and real concerns always pop up. So I think it's important we tackle them head on, not with feelings, but with what the actual data tells us. You see this argument online all the time, right? Like this comment from Reddit. The logic seems to make sense. Just let the free market do its thing. High prices will encourage developers to build more, creating a surplus that will eventually bring prices down for everyone. It sounds good on paper, but what's actually happening on the ground? Well, the data tells a totally different story. The market is building, yeah, but it's not building what's needed most. In fact, while the county lost more than half of its truly affordable rentals, almost all the new construction was aimed at the high end of the market. The vacancy rate is basically zero, which shows there's a severe shortage, not a surplus. So the market isn't fixing the gap at the bottom. If anything, it's making it wider. All right, now for the big one. This is probably the deepest concern people have. This fear that building affordable or supportive housing is going to somehow damage a neighborhood, bring it down. It's a really common worry. But is it backed up by evidence? Let's look at one more number, 65%. This is where the data just completely flips that common assumption on its head. A study found that when you have mixed income properties, the tenants in supportive housing actually had a 65% higher chance of staying stable and housed. So integration and support don't cause instability. The evidence shows they actually create it. So if the problem is this clear and the data is busting some of these common myths, how does a community actually start to solve this? Well, Wake County's approach shows it's not about finding one single magic bullet. It's about launching a coordinated, multi-pronged strategy. Their strategy is built on 4 pillars that have to work together. It starts with prevention, which means helping people before they hit a crisis. Then, at the same time, you focus on development, actually building and protecting affordable homes. But, a roof over your head isn't always enough, so they add in supportive services. And of course, none of this can happen without engagement, partnering with the private sector to make it all work. And a really key part of that whole strategy is something called permanent supportive housing, or PSH. This is the crucial idea. It is not just about housing. It's about combining an affordable home with the services people need, like case management or healthcare coordination, to help them not just get housed, but stay housed for the long haul. Okay, so we've seen the problem, we've seen the real-world impacts, and we've seen the strategies that are in play. But it is so important to be honest about the path forward. It is not easy, and there are some major barriers still standing in the way. And these challenges are significant. For example, state law in North Carolina follows something called the Dillon Rule, which basically means local governments often have their hands tied and can't innovate as much as they might want to. Then you add in state funding rules that can actually discourage the best kinds of projects, plus the sky-high cost of land and construction. You're fighting a constant uphill battle. And all of this brings us to the final and maybe the most important question. We always talk about the cost of building affordable housing, but after seeing the strain it puts on our economy, our healthcare system, and our schools, what is the true cost of doing nothing? Because in the end, this equation we've been talking about, it isn't just about houses. It's about the fundamental building blocks of a strong, healthy community, a stable workforce that businesses can rely on, healthier citizens, and a resilient economy that actually works for everyone. That's what's really at stake here.